The projector flickered, the boardroom lights dimmed, and my heart raced. This was it. My moment. Months of late nights, skipped dinners, and endless revisions all rested inside the sleek silver laptop sitting on the table. Or at least it should have. I pressed the power button, but instead of booting up, the screen remained black. A faint crunch echoed in my memory, the sound of shattered circuits, the sound I'd heard the night before when my father's hand slammed it against the floor. Laughter bubbled from the back of the room, sharp, dismissive. I glanced toward the door and saw him there, arms crossed, smirk plastered across his face, as if daring me to fail. He believed his sabotage had killed my chance. I swallowed the burn in my throat, steadying my voice for the room. They thought this would break me, I whispered to myself. But they had no idea what was coming. And in that instant, what was meant to destroy me became the spark that changed everything. By the time I was 24, I had learned how to live in silence. Not the peaceful kind of silence that comes with meditation or calm mornings, but the heavy kind. The kind that presses on your ribs, filling every room you walk into. That silence was my father's favorite weapon. On the outside, he was the neighborhood's pride. Sharp dresser, loud laugh, always quick to offer advice about discipline and raising strong kids. But inside our home, strength meant control. His word was law, his moods dictated the atmosphere. And if anyone dared to resist, even with something as small as a sigh, they would pay for it. I wasn't rebellious. In fact, I was the opposite. I studied harder than my siblings, picked up extra chores without being asked, and avoided arguments like landmines. Where they rolled their eyes and fought back, I bit my tongue and kept going. It wasn't fear so much as survival. If I could keep the peace, maybe I could breathe. Work became my sanctuary. I had managed to land a spot in a competitive firm, one that took me seriously in ways my own father never had. I was quiet in the office, but consistent, reliable, the kind of person bosses trusted with last-minute assignments because they knew I'd deliver. When they announced they'd be hosting a promotion pitch, an open call for ambitious employees to present ideas, I stayed up for nights, sketching, drafting, testing. That laptop became my lifeline. Every slide, every note, every idea that I had stitched together lived there. I carried it like glass, polishing fingerprints away, sliding it back into its case with a care I'd never shown anything else. It wasn't just a machine. It was proof. Proof that I could create something of value. Proof that my voice mattered. Proof that I wasn't the quiet shadow my father claimed I was. But he noticed the way I clung to it. He always noticed. And in my father's world, anything that gave me joy or purpose was something he needed to crush. The first sting came one evening when I returned home from work. He was lounging in the living room, his boots muddy, propped up on the coffee table where my younger brother's half-finished video game console sat. My brother was laughing with him, a sound that always stung like vinegar in a wound. "Look at this," my dad said, patting the console as if it were a golden trophy. "Your brother built this from scraps. That's real talent. You, with your little presentations, what's that worth? A PowerPoint doesn't feed a family." He grinned, eyes sparkling with pride as he ruffled my brother's hair. My mother laughed politely from the kitchen. And me? I stood there, holding my laptop bag, invisible. I wanted to speak, to explain that my work wasn't just a PowerPoint, that it could change how our team operated, maybe even land me a role that paid enough to help with bills. But I knew better. Every word I spoke in defense of myself was a spark to his temper. So I stayed quiet. But inside, something twisted. It wasn't jealousy, it was the recognition that no matter what I did, no matter how much I tried, my father's approval was a door I'd never be allowed to open. That night, I worked late into the hours, my fingers dancing across the keys as the glow of the laptop bathed my room in soft light. The sound of typing became my heartbeat, steady and strong. I didn't notice the footsteps in the hall or the way shadows lingered by my door. The humiliation was small at first, his mocking words, his dismissive laughter. But it was only the beginning. Because deep down, my father wasn't satisfied with silence. He wanted me to break. And soon he would find the perfect way to try. The days leading up to my promotion pitch felt like living in a storm that never broke. I'd wake up with my heart racing, sweat sticking to my shirt, replaying the same thought over and over. If I pull this off, everything changes. At work, my colleagues were buzzing. People whispered in the halls about who might land the new role. Some doubted me. "She's quiet," I overheard one say. "I don't think she has the fire." But a few nodded in my direction with quiet respect. My manager had even smiled at me once, saying, "Don't underestimate yourself. You've got something solid here." At home, though, the air was different. My father seemed to sense the importance of what I was working on, and sensing it meant he couldn't leave it alone. It started subtly. A sudden blackout in my room while I was mid-edit. He flipped the breaker without warning, smirking when I came out clutching my laptop. "Power surge," he said with a shrug. Another night, he came in while I was revising and tapped on my shoulder. "You know, no matter what you do in that fancy office, you'll still come home to me. Remember that." I tried to block him out. I turned up my headphones, worked later into the night, and told myself that all the tension would be worth it once I stood in that boardroom. But the pressure seeped into everything. My appetite thinned. My hands trembled even when holding a cup of coffee. Sleep became a battlefield. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw his smirk, heard his mocking laugh, felt the weight of being the family's invisible child. And he didn't stop at words. One Saturday afternoon, he called for a family meeting. My siblings gathered around, the TV muted, the room heavy with unspoken rules. He leaned forward, eyes glinting, and said, "You know what I don't understand? How someone can waste so much time staring at a screen instead of doing something real. Your brother's out there fixing engines, your sister's working double shifts, and you, sitting on a laptop like it's worth gold." His words weren't random. They were arrows aimed straight at me. I kept my head down, my fingers tightening around the strap of my bag. He wanted me to explode, to argue, to prove him right, but I wouldn't give him the satisfaction. Still, the humiliation landed. My siblings exchanged smirks. My mother pretended to wipe the counter, avoiding my eyes, and I sat there, silent, burning. That night, I nearly cracked. I stared at the ceiling thinking, maybe he's right. Maybe I am wasting my time. Maybe I'll fail, and all this effort will mean nothing. My chest ached, my throat tight, like my own thoughts were trying to strangle me. But just when I felt the weight pulling me under, something shifted. The next morning, I dragged myself to a coffee shop, laptop in hand, and set up in the corner booth. My eyes burned from exhaustion, but I kept working. And that's when she appeared, Maya, one of my coworkers carrying a latte and a stack of papers. She slid into the seat across from me, raising an eyebrow. "You look like you haven't slept in days." I managed a tired laugh. "Feels like weeks." Her tone softened. "You know, you're not alone in this. People at the office see how hard you're working. I see it. Don't let anyone make you think otherwise." Her words hit harder than she knew. For the first time in weeks, I felt the knot in my chest loosen, just a little. That was the first time someone reminded me I wasn't alone. And it would make all the difference when the storm finally broke. By the following week, tension in the house had reached a fever pitch. My promotion pitch was just days away, and every hour I worked seemed to draw my father's attention like blood in the water. He no longer bothered with subtle jabs. One night, I came home to find my laptop bag missing from my room. Panic surged through me. I tore apart the blankets, the closet, even the kitchen counters. Finally, I spotted it sitting on the dining table, unzipped, the screen smeared with greasy fingerprints. My father leaned back in his chair, sipping his beer, grinning like a cat who'd cornered a mouse. "Relax," he said casually. "I was just checking what you're so secretive about." My hands trembled as I pulled it away from him, wiping the screen with the edge of my sleeve. I wanted to scream, to demand why he couldn't leave me alone, but the smirk on his face told me exactly why. Because it thrilled him to see me shaken. Still, I stayed quiet, but he wasn't done. 2 days later, as I rehearsed in the living room, slides glowing on the TV screen, he cut me off with a scoff. "You really think those people at your job care about your little charts? You think they'll give you the promotion over everyone else? Let me tell you something. Those suits don't want someone like you. They'll chew you up and spit you out." His voice carried across the house, loud enough for everyone to hear. My brother snickered from the hallway. My mother sighed, muttering, "Don't start, please." But he kept going. "Mark my words, you'll embarrass yourself. And when you do, don't come crying to me." That night, sleep didn't come at all. I sat in bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying his voice over and over. The cruel part was, it worked. Doubt spread like cracks in glass. I almost considered backing out of the pitch. Almost. Because when I dragged myself to the office the next morning, Maya was waiting by the elevator. She handed me a folder filled with printouts of my slides. "Back up," she said firmly. "If your laptop dies, if something glitches, you've got this." I stared at her, speechless. She didn't know the details, didn't know how badly I needed someone in my corner, but somehow she sensed it. Her support should have been enough to calm me. But back home, the storm was only growing. The night before the pitch, I walked in to find my father in my room again. This time my laptop wasn't just smudged, it was cracked. The screen spiderwebbed from the corner, shards glittering faintly in the dim light. My chest went cold. "What did you do?" I whispered, the words barely escaping my throat. He shrugged, standing tall, looming over me. "Maybe you should have kept your toys out of reach." "What are you going to do now, huh? Cry? Cancel your big day?" His smirk widened as though he'd already won. In his eyes, he hadn't just broken a machine, he'd broken me. And for a moment, I thought he had. My breath hitched, my knees wobbled, and I clutched the edge of my desk just to stay upright. But then I remembered Maya's folder. The backup. The proof that not everything depended on the fragile piece of glass he'd destroyed. He thought he still had control. He didn't. Because in that moment, I realized something my father had never understood. True power isn't about destruction, it's about resilience. And while he'd shattered my laptop, he had only sharpened my resolve. The boardroom was waiting. The morning of the pitch, I dressed with hands that still shook, sliding my blazer over my shoulders like armor. My laptop bag, now useless, sat in the corner of my room like a tombstone. But Maya's folder rested in my hands, heavier than paper should feel, like proof that I wasn't walking into battle unarmed. I thought the storm had peaked with the broken screen. I was wrong, because my father wasn't finished. When I stepped into the kitchen, he was already waiting, coffee mug steaming in front of him. My brother leaned against the counter, trying and failing to hide his grin. "You know," my father said, voice casual but cutting, "I had a word with your uncle last night. Told him about your little promotion pitch." He laughed. "Said you're wasting your time, chasing dreams you'll never catch. He said someone like you doesn't stand a chance in that world." My brother chuckled, adding, "Yeah, imagine them taking you seriously." The words should have slid off my back, but they didn't. They pierced. That was the thing about family. You can ignore the world's insults, but when they come from the people who raised you, they burn. Still, I kept my voice steady. "We'll see." His eyes narrowed. He wasn't expecting defiance. That day at the office, I delivered my pitch with my hands gripping Maya's folder, my voice shaking at first, then steadying as the words flowed. By the time I finished, silence hung heavy in the room. Not dismissive silence, but thoughtful silence. Then a single nod from the director, then another, and finally, applause. I had done it. But victory wasn't clean, because when I got home, the rumors were already waiting. A cousin texted me, "Why's your dad telling everyone at dinner you almost got fired?" Said your presentation was embarrassing. Another message, "He said you're making things up, that no company would promote you." The pit in my stomach grew. It wasn't enough for him to sabotage me privately. Now he was dragging my name through the mud in front of relatives, neighbors, anyone who would listen. Flying monkeys, that's what they call them. The people toxic leaders recruit to carry their poison. And my father had a flock. Suddenly, every family gathering was a gauntlet of whispers and smirks. "She thinks she's better than us now. Did you hear she cried in the meeting? Poor thing, trying so hard for nothing." At first, I wanted to hide, to skip dinners, dodge phone calls, bury myself in work. But something had shifted in me since that boardroom. For the first time, I had tasted what it felt like to be heard, and I wasn't going to let him take that away. So I started documenting. Every cruel word, every rumor, every sabotage attempt. I printed screenshots of texts, kept notes of conversations, even photographed the cracked laptop screen. The folder that Maya had given me for my pitch slowly grew thicker. Not with slides this time, but with evidence. I stopped trying to win his approval. Instead, I began preparing for war. I leaned on allies, too, quiet ones at first. Maya checked in often. My manager pulled me aside one day and said, "Don't let outside noise distract you. We see what you bring here." Even my neighbor, Mrs. Alvarez, who had overheard one of my father's tirades through the thin walls, shook her head and muttered, "He's not breaking you, not if I can help it." Piece by piece, the fortress of isolation he had built around me began to crumble. And yet, my father didn't stop. His voice grew louder, his lies bolder, his control slipping like sand through his fists. But he couldn't see it. He thought the louder he shouted, the more the world would believe him. He had no idea he was only building the stage for his own downfall. The day of reckoning was coming, and no one could stop it. The breaking point came on a Sunday evening at my cousin's engagement party. The hall glowed with string lights and polished floors, laughter bouncing off the walls. I had dressed simply, not to stand out, but to survive another night of whispers. I should have known my father wouldn't let it pass quietly. Halfway through dinner, he raised his glass. His smile was broad, his voice booming with that practiced charm that had fooled neighbors and relatives for years. "You know," he said, tapping his glass, "I want to say something about my daughter here." My fork froze mid-air. The table quieted. He continued, "She's been, well, obsessed lately. Running around with her little laptop, acting like she's some big shot. Told everyone at work she was getting promoted. But let's be honest." He chuckled. "It didn't happen. Poor thing embarrassed herself in front of her whole office. I told her, stick to what you know. Leave the real work to the rest of us." The room erupted in polite laughter. Some people avoided my eyes, others smirked behind their glasses. My chest burned, every muscle begging me to shrink into nothing. But then, I saw Maya standing at the back of the hall. She wasn't supposed to be there. She'd come as a friend of a friend, but her eyes locked with mine, steady, certain. In that split second, I remembered. I wasn't powerless, not anymore. I stood. My chair scraped against the floor, loud enough to silence the table. "Actually," I said, voice calm but firm, "that's not true." All eyes turned to me. My father's smirk faltered, just a fraction. I reached into my bag and pulled out the thick folder I'd been building for weeks. Pages of proof, emails, contracts, pay stubs, photos of the cracked laptop, even a copy of the official promotion letter signed by my manager. I placed it on the table with a thud. "This is the truth," I said, my voice steady now. I was promoted. My project was approved, And while you've been telling everyone I failed, the reality is, I paused, letting the silence stretch. I succeeded in spite of you. The room went still. Forks paused, glasses lowered. My father's face flushed red, his jaw tightening. He tried to laugh, to wave it off. She's lying. You know how dramatic she is. But I cut him off. No, this is proof, and I'm done letting you twist my life into your story. I don't want your apologies. I don't want your approval. I want change. For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then slowly, heads turned, not toward me, but toward him. Their eyes narrowed, their laughter gone. The mask he'd worn for years cracked under the weight of silence. His hands trembled as he slammed his glass down. You ungrateful... But the words fell flat. No one laughed with him this time. No one nodded. Even my mother, who had always stood quietly at his side, lowered her gaze, refusing to meet his eyes. The power he had held for so long slipped from him, piece by piece, right there at that table. I took a deep breath, my heart pounding not with fear, but with clarity. For the first time, I wasn't shrinking. I was standing tall. And as I sat back down, the applause that erupted wasn't for him. It was for me. After the confrontation at the engagement party, things in my family were never the same. The next morning, I woke to silence in the house. Not the heavy silence of control I'd grown used to, but something different. Hollow. My father didn't greet me with taunts, didn't hover in the doorway to remind me of my insignificance. He barely looked at me at all. For years, his power had been built on fear and performance. My silence was his applause, my shame his standing ovation. But when the curtain fell and the audience turned against him, his stage collapsed. Neighbors stopped visiting as often. Relatives who once parroted his jokes began calling me privately, whispering apologies they had never dared to speak before. Even my brother, usually his favorite audience, avoided his gaze, uncomfortable with the weight of truth laid bare. It wasn't an instant victory. He raged for weeks, slamming doors, muttering about betrayal, pacing the halls like a caged animal. But the fire had lost its fuel. His words no longer landed. His anger no longer silenced me. The mask was gone, and behind it was nothing more than a man who had mistaken cruelty for strength. Meanwhile, my world opened. The promotion came with a new title, a raise, and, most importantly, a sense of belonging I had never known. My manager entrusted me with a team of my own. Maya became more than just an ally. She became a friend I could trust, someone who reminded me that family isn't always the people you're born to. It's the people who choose to stand beside you. I moved into a small apartment of my own, not lavish, but filled with light. For the first time, I decorated with things that reflected me. Shelves of books I loved, photos of places I dreamed of visiting, a secondhand desk where I placed my repaired laptop, screen whole again. But I didn't hide the old one, the one my father had smashed. I kept it too, not as a wound, but as a reminder. I framed the cracked lid in glass and leaned it against the wall beside my desk. What once symbolized his attempt to destroy me now stood as proof that I had risen anyway. And with every day that passed, I felt the weight lift. I set boundaries I never thought I'd have the courage to enforce. When he called, demanding I visit, I calmly said, "Not today." When he mocked me under his breath at a gathering, I smiled and walked away, my silence now my shield, not his weapon. One evening, as I stood by my window, watching the city lights flicker, I realized something profound. The humiliation I had felt at the start, the broken laptop, the rumors, the laughter. It wasn't the end of my story. It was the spark that forced me to claim it. I wasn't the quiet shadow in his house anymore. I wasn't the invisible child. I was the author of my own narrative, the builder of my own life. And the final irony? The more he tried to break me, the stronger I became. This wasn't the end, I whispered into the night, a smile tugging at my lips. It was the beginning. Have you ever faced someone who tried to keep you small? Someone who used power, lies, or even family ties to hold you back? If you have, you know the weight of their control, the sting of their words, the loneliness of feeling invisible. But here's the truth. Their version of you isn't the real you. You are stronger than their sabotage. You are brighter than their doubt. I shared my story because I want you to see what I finally learned. Worth isn't something they give you. It's something you claim for yourself. So tell me, what's the moment you rose above the voices that tried to hold you down? Share it in the comments. Your story might be the spark that helps someone else rise too. Because in the end, survival isn't revenge. Rising is.